Hey, this is Eric Dorward with the Spartan Rocketry Club here starting a new build, and this one is very new indeed. So far we've built nothing but Estes kits, and that's great. You know, Estes is a fantastic manufacturer. There's a reason that they are kind of like the number one people for building model kits. But some of the things that we want to do, Estes doesn't really offer for a variety of reasons. And one in particular that I want to build is a cluster rocket. There aren't any cluster rockets available from Estes now, for good reason. I mean, cluster rockets are complicated, they're hard to fly, and we don't really need more than one motor powering a rocket, at least at the start, because we have so many different varieties. And now that composite motors are pretty widely available, those things have basically replaced the need for clustering. But still, real rockets use clusters of motors, so it would be nice to be able to do that kind of thing from time to time as well. So, the build that we're going to do today is the T117 13. This is a three motor cluster, and it uses mini motors. That would be the 13 parts, so 13 millimeter diameter motors. This is going to be somewhat complicated. It's definitely not like a first build that anybody should try, but it's from a company called Rocketarium, and I've built a few things of theirs before. They do have a lot of cluster kits that are available. Their parts are really nice, and their instructions, as you can see, they are not quite the same as what Estes look like, so they're a little bit different, but the descriptions are very accurate instead of just pictures, and the pictures that are included are very nice as well. So this is a good company, and I look forward to this build. The first thing we need to build is the motor mount. And the motor mount is going to be one of the more sophisticated things we need to do because it's not just one, it's three. But it at least starts in a very familiar place, and that would be with putting in our engine blocks. We got to do this three times. We have one of these things to push it inside as well, as per usual. The instructions here say that I need to mark off 1/8 of an inch onto this tube. That's not much at all, but still we want to get this right. So there is 1/8 of an inch. Now we are going to apply the glue as per usual inside the tube. And it would be nice to get it basically in the right place. So I'm going to break. I don't know why this stick has some pink on it. I don't know what I was gluing that made it pink, but yeah. Oh, that's epoxy. We don't want that on there. So I'm going to need to remove a bit of this dowel. There we go. Problem solved. And we will paint with the glue on. So I want it approximately, I'm going to give it a little short. So about that deep in. Great. I'm going to put some glue on my scrap here and then paint it on the inside of the tube into about my line and just kind of brush it around. I'm not going to film myself doing all three of these because you've seen one, you've seen them all. It's not like it's any different the other times, but that should basically do it. Plenty of glue in there. In goes the engine block, and then we are going to carefully push slowly so we don't push too far, because if we push too far it's really hard to get it back out, and that's great. The reason why, by the way, we do this, and we've done this in a lot of our builds, is that this yellow thing is the exact size of a 13 millimeter motor, and we want a little bit of the back end to stick out. In fact, we want that much to stick out. So that is a really basic one. We've certainly done stuff like that before. That is no shock. The next thing we need to do, I need to put the glue in each one of these, but all three of these, once they have their motors attached, they're going to end up getting glued together like this. Some of that you're not going to see me do either. Also, while I was at it, there's a step a little bit further along in the instructions that calls for this bit of a Kevlar thread to have some knots tied in it, and I did that as well. Okay, so I am going to apply the extra glue into the other three tubes, and I will be back momentarily. Okay, now we're back. I have carefully glued them all, And I will point out that while I was doing this, it was actually pretty hard to see down here to see whether or not I had put the block in properly or not, or at all for that matter. So what I did after I did all this is I put a little mark. I wrote an E for end at the end of all those that I'd done as I did them. So that way, first of all, I knew they were done. And second of all, I'll know which way to put the motor in, because that, of course, will matter. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to glue two of these things together. So that's pretty straightforward. The idea here, of course, is that we're going to run a length of glue along one of these things and just put it up against one of the others. This does not really require much precision. So I'm going to do my best to get this line of glue pretty straight. It's probably not going to be perfectly straight, but that's okay. That looks reasonably good. It's obviously not perfectly straight, but not super important. I'm going to spread this out just a little bit in case I got any kind of beading going on, and also to deal with the fact that it wasn't quite straight kind of in this little section here. That's okay. So there's my glue, and all I need to do then is put two of them together, and I'm going to do this so that they're flat. I'm not going to try to hold them up. That would be really irritating. I do want to have them end to end. So that looks pretty good. I'm just going to hold this here for a second before I inspect. And yeah, that looks pretty good. End to end, I can push to make sure. And I do have this little bead of glue coming off. Look quite perfect, but they're awfully close. I will end up reinforcing that later, but not this instant. While this is drying, there are a few things that I need to do, and one is, so this bit of cord is going to end up lying like this. But before I do that, I need to measure off 3 inches because that's how deep into the tube it's going to go. And note that this is going out the top of the fixture rather than the bottom where the motors are, because we certainly wouldn't want a piece of string dangling out the back. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So it should go about that far in. And if I tied my knot right earlier, well, there are 2 knots. One is as close to the end as I could get it. The other should be about halfway. And yeah, I mean, it's close. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. Those are just to provide some extra support. Now, this needs to dry for a bit. The other thing, well, I have to eventually make some more marks, but there's no point in doing them just quite yet. This really needs to dry pretty thoroughly before I put the third piece on. So in the meantime, I'm going to skip ahead in the directions to see if there's anything I can do while I'm waiting. And indeed there is. The top part of this, so that this is going to be basically in kind of 3 pieces as we build it. There is a part that I need to build that involves a bulkhead. So let's grab that. So the bulkhead is going to fit inside of this bit here. I'm also grabbing the fins because we can at least start working on them while this waits. So inside my bag here, I've got some decals. I've got a launch lug. And I've got the bulkhead and an eye hook. So I'm going to screw this in. Instructions say screw it in. Make kind of a pilot hole for it. Then I'm going to unscrew it, and I'm going to put some glue in to keep it as attached as it can. This is actually in there pretty well, so the glue isn't going to make a whole lot of difference, I don't think. But still, we'll follow the instructions, and it's always nice to have more stability and more strength than less. So a little bit of glue on the hole. And then, of course, I can't see where exactly the hole is anymore, but I can certainly feel it. And then I'm just going to re-screw this in. That's pretty good. It's pierced through the other side. I don't think it really needs to go much farther. And I will just kind of clean up my mess here a little bit and also give myself something kind of similar to a fillet. So that's taken care of. I'm not going to mess with the rest of the bulkhead right now. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take out my fins and we can process them while we wait. Now, we have 3 fins. They've already been cut. They're cut very nicely. There are no burrs, so we don't need to sand them down, at least on the edges. Unfortunately, because they've already been cut, we do have to sand them individually instead of in a big sheet, which is a whole lot easier. This is also, unless I am seriously mistaken, but I'm pretty confident in this, this is not balsa. This is basswood, which is a little heavier, a little stronger. So there's a trade-off there. Obviously, we're going to make the rocket a little heavier than if we were using balsa fins. One thing I like about this is that the grain in balsa is pretty bad to deal with. It's not anywhere near as bad in basswood. So all the hard work that we need to do to fill this properly, it takes days and days to fill it properly. It's not as bad if we're using basswood. So among other things, I need to just sand it down, and that's where my sanding block comes into play. It sands pretty well. It's harder to work with than balsa as well. That is a drawback. But in general, there's less work to do. So yeah, just that little bit. And it's not done yet, obviously. And I'm not going to film myself sanding this whole thing because that would be really boring. But I got rid of most of the mess already just with that little bit of work. I do need to shape the fins as well, which we should probably go in the instructions and see right here. There's even a nice diagram telling me, make sure you sand the right part, as I suspected this, but this is my leading edge, so I'm going to round that. This is my trail edge, so I'm going to round that as well. It also says that I'm going to need to bevel the root edge. Now that is very unusual, but the reason is once this engine assembly is completed, the fin is going to kind of go in like this. And if it were not beveled, beveling, by the way, there's even a little picture. It shows that we're just going to kind of sand at a 45-degree angle to make this come to a point rather than just a flat edge. Almost always we don't touch the root edge, but in this case we're going to. So it fits deeper into the groove in between these, which actually will make it stronger, hopefully, and actually pretty easy to line up, one would think. So I'm going to finish sanding this. There's no real point in watching that. I'm also going to round the lead and tail edge and maybe the tip part as well. I haven't decided on that. But also, that's really not worth watching either. So I'm going to let this dry. And the last little bit in this segment, I believe, is I'm going to attach this. And that'll be super exciting. So I will see you in a little bit when the glue dries. All right, so the glue is dry enough for us to proceed here. Now, before we actually glue the top piece on, we need to get the Kevlar string inside where it belongs. So there's my mark. Actually, I had it upside down. Oops. Now I'm going to put some glue in the crevice down here. And then I'm going to lay the cord inside. Remember, this is going away from where the motors are going to be. So in goes the glue. That'll actually serve to strengthen the joint too, which is nice. And in goes the cord. I'm going to kind of poke it in with this pencil here to make sure that it's actually sitting in the glue, because otherwise it kind of defeats the point. And it's a little too small for my fingers to do an effective job. So it says that I want to have glue in there, and it looks fantastic sticking out the top. That's great. Now I need to figure out, I'm going to put glue on top of it too. So not just underneath, and this is already spread on top, so I don't need to worry too much about that. But I'm going to put glue on top of this as well. And I'm going to kind of spread that out too with the benefit of my handy dandy dowel here. Just to make sure that this is well set, because this is the anchor point for our shock cord. That's what the purpose of this is. Now it is time for the top to go on. Now I could just put some glue haphazardly and kind of eyeball it, but the instructions suggest that instead of doing that, what I should do instead is take my pencil and just kind of draw a line, holding things down so that I can see where I should be putting the glue. So I'm just running it right in the crack here. All right, so you can see I now have 2 lines. It was actually starting to set a little bit on there because some of the glue from the crack, or from what the string was sticking out. That's fine. I am going to apply then the glue on top of both of the lines that I drew as best as I can. So if we just eyeballed this, it would probably work, but we would probably also get glue either not quite in the right place on the inside, in which case it wouldn't be as strong as it should be, or on the outside, in which case it would look bad. And although, well, it wouldn't be strong too, but it would also look bad, and that's something we would like to avoid. We'd like this to look decent when we're done with it. Spreading this out, of course, I appreciate, kind of undoes the benefits of, being precise, but I'd rather have it spread out so that it applies pretty well. All right, so I'm going to put this right on top, making sure that all my E's for engines are in the same place. And this is an E, so I actually had it upside down. It's a good thing I noticed or looked to do that earlier. And there we go. I'm going to take the glue and I'm going to kind of spread it in here. Looks like I missed a decent amount on that side. And this side looks pretty good. I do want to make sure that they are all lined up at the bottom. That would be pretty darn important. So I'm going to kind of push down to make sure that they are. I'm also going to grab my dowel, and in any cases where I see that it's particularly bad, I'm going to kind of scrape it out. All right, so that looks pretty good. What I need to do before anything else gets completely dry is, this is the next tube that it's going to go inside. I'm not going to permanently fit it in here, but I am going to test to make sure that it does fit, and it does slide in. It should be a pretty snug fit, and that seems pretty good. All right, so I'm going to let that dry. That kind of does it for now. I've got my fins. I sanded them anyway. I'm going to still bevel them. Actually, I'm going to do that in the next video, and then shape them a little bit as well. We have a little bit of construction left to do on that, but otherwise we're in pretty good shape for our first video. So stay tuned for part 2.